What's up, guys? This is a new series on SQL queries specifically, and this topic is SQL joins, so hopefully you learned something. So the question is combine two tables. Here we have two tables, person and address, and our person table has a primary key of person ID, it has a last name and a first name. So the person ID, as I said, is a primary key, and it has their first name and last name. And our address has an address ID, which is the primary key, and a person ID, which is a foreign key, which references our person table. And we want to output a table that has our first name, last name, city, and state for each person. And if the person doesn't have an address, then we want to report null instead. So let's look at an example of this. So here we have our person table. Here we have our address table. So as you can see, Bob Alice right here is the only person that has an address, as you can see, since we don't have a 1 in our person ID column. So we would report null for the address for Alan Wang. And as you can see, that's what we're doing. So our first name, last name, city, and state. So let's get into the concept of joins really quick. So here we have this Venn diagram representing our two tables. So here's our person table. Sorry for my handwriting. Our address. And say if we just did a normal join, or an inner join is what it's called, we would just get the intersection of these two tables. So in that case, we would just get Alan Wang, or actually we would just get Bob Alice. We would just get this row right here, but no Alan Wang, since Alan Wang isn't part of this address table. But if we wanted to do a left join, we would get every single row from our person table. Let's actually do some coding to make this a little bit more clear. So, whoops. So say we wanted to write our SQL statement. So we have our person, first name, person, last name. Our address has our city and state in it. We want to select that from our person table. Person. And say we just did a regular join. Let's join it on our address. So this is how you do a join statement. On. And they both have person ID. So we would do person.person ID equals address.person ID. In that case, we would only get one row, as I said in this example. Since only Bob Alice is referenced in both tables, we would only get one row. Since, this one isn't referenced, there's no 1 in the address table, and also there's no person ID of 3 in the person table. So let's go back. And so let's just run this and see. So as you can see, we only get Bob Alice, this one row. Now, if we wanted to do what's called a right join, So here's our Venn diagram again. Here's our person, our address. So what I just showed you is the intersection, just a typical inner join. But if you did a right join, you would get every single row from our address table. So even if our address doesn't have a person associated with it, we would still output a first name and last name of null. So in this case, we would get New York City, leak code, whatever this city and state are. And then, so in this case, we have a person ID of 2, and we would get Bob Alice, and then we would get null and null for California leak code. So let me show you that. So if we did a right join, we would get 2 rows, but we would get a null first name and last name, as you can see. But we want to, in this problem specifically, we want to get all the people, even if they don't have a city or state, or if they don't have an address associated with them. So that would, in this case, be a left join, right? Since we want to get everything from our person table and all the intersections with our address table. So that would be what's called a left join. Left join. So let's just go back and code that. Yep, as you can see, this works. We'll submit it. Cool. And that's it for this lesson. Hopefully you guys learned something, and there will be other SQL videos coming in the future. And thanks for watching.